Hey, this is Coach Shay with Alpha Girl Soccer Academy, and welcome to the Alpha Girl Soccer podcast show, where we aim to inspire, empower, and positively impact female athletes. Welcome back to the show, guys. I have an awesome guest interview to share with you today. So I virtually met Mac on Instagram a few months back, and I loved what she was doing. She has her own podcast called the Sideline Perspective, so we decided to interview each other to bring you some awesome info and conversation. Mac is a recent graduate of Dartmouth College, where she majored in psychology and played both ice hockey and rugby. She started the Sideline Perspective as a way to bring athletes and people together to create a supportive community where individuals can share inspiration, support, and advice in the real highs and lows of their transition from sport to the professional world. In this episode, we cover everything relating to dealing with injury, transitioning from being an athlete to a non-athlete, how to find your identity outside of sports, and more. I can't wait for you to listen. Enjoy. Hey, Mac, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good. So I'm really excited to kind of just chat and see where the conversation goes, because I know we both kind of have similar stories with injuries and kind of finding our identity, after sport. So I'm excited to learn more about you and just kind of chat.
Yeah, me as well. I think we have a lot of similar passions and interests. So looking forward to diving into those.
Nice. So I guess kind of the first thing I wanted to dive in with you, and this is something that obviously we both have a lot of experience in, is with like Sideline Perspective, like your main focus, and tell me if I'm wrong, is like helping athletes kind of transition from I'm playing sports, either I got injured or I'm done with sports, and now what do I do?
Exactly. Yeah. Because it can be a really confusing, tough time. And I think anyone who's had their time on the sidelines can resonate. It puts into perspective and challenges you on a lot of different ways to understand who you are, to understand how to manage your time, to understand how to structure your priorities. And so I just think there's something very distinct about stepping back from your sport and the things that you need to navigate in those windows that athletes could benefit from talking more about.
And like for you, when was the last time that you played like a competitive game? And like, what was the feeling? Because I like remember specifically mine and like what I felt during that moment. But like, what was yours like?
That's a great question. I haven't gone back to like reflecting on what exactly that was in a while. So I would say for me, it was just about 2.5 years ago now. I was playing rugby at a tournament in Las Vegas, and I got tackled towards the end of a sevens match and fell and ultimately broke my collarbone. I didn't realize in the moment that it was broken. I played out the last like 2 or 3 minutes of the game, and then went to the med tent, and that's when it all started to, kind of hit me of like, this hurts, it's uncomfortable, the adrenaline's wearing off. Got surgery, and 2.5 years later, it's doing great. But that was kind of the last time that I put on a jersey and competed truly with a team. And yeah, that was, I didn't realize, I guess, at that moment that was going to be something that was going to create a distinct shift in my life of time to maybe move on or move to a new chapter. And to think back on it is wild, because in the moment, I felt like so much was getting ripped away from me. I felt like this new chapter that I had just begun, I was only 1.5 years into playing rugby competitively because I had found it after my collegiate hockey career, was in love with it, the people, the places it was taking me, was looking to like really dive into it and keep that like hardcore athlete mentality. And there goes just my first truly serious injury in my athletic career. Forced my world upside down. I was living in Hawaii. I had to move back to New England due to numerous different aspects. And I felt like things were really unfairly getting ripped away from me. I look back now and I realized that was one of the most pivotal moments to where I am today, what I've accomplished today, and even getting the Sideline Perspective off the ground and building to what it is now. So you don't always notice it when you go through it, I'd say, like, and you can't discount the mental struggle and the emotions that come with those moments. But I think there's always something really incredible to be found from the ways that we grow and can change in adversity like that. So.
Yeah. So when you were playing hockey, did you know that you would continue to compete and like do rugby? Or was this an idea that happened after you were done playing hockey in college?
Great question. My junior summer, leading up into my senior year, was when I first saw rugby on TV for the Olympics. And prior to that, I'd been exposed to the sport just a little bit. I had seen the men play when I was studying abroad. But there I'm looking at a field full of like 250-pound guys tackling each other in a foreign language, and it was raining, and I didn't understand the rules. And so by no means did I see myself on that field, or was I drawn to the sport. But seeing the women play sevens on TV for the Olympics, totally different story. All of a sudden I'm seeing a sport that's this incredible combination of soccer, which was my first love as an athlete growing up, and hockey, which I went on to play Division I at. And it's the physicality, the pace, the space, the passing. And I was like, man, that I can see myself doing with those strong women, and what a cool sport. So that summer I walked into the rugby coach's office at Dartmouth and I said, hey, I'm fully committed to my senior season with the hockey team. I owe it to the team. I ended up being captain, so I was committed to that. But I have my spring and I have my time to be eligible to play in this other sport. Would you have me just for the spring season? And to their credit, they said, yeah, absolutely. Come on out, like be a part of the team. And so I kind of had one eye on the rugby team fall and winter leading up to it, and just watching a little bit more rugby, knowing it was something I was going to test out and be a part of. I don't think I realized, though, at the beginning how much I would fall in love with the sport and how much I would, in a way, actually use it to help ease that transition away from hockey.
Dang, that rugby and hockey, you can't really get more physical, and just like, I feel like it takes a different kind of woman to play those two sports.
I think what led me to both of them was not necessarily that I have like this inherent aggressive mentality. In fact, I'd say if you like ask people who knew me, I don't really identify that way at all. But they both have these really strong team components. Like you need to have everyone in the team operating at all cylinders and showing up and being great in their role. Like no hockey team can be successful if they just have one line that's great. You need 4 lines because you can only skate for 30 to 45 seconds at a time. Same with rugby. You know, the ball's on one side, you need people making big tackles, and you're on the other side in the wings, like waiting to step up and contribute to your aspect of the team. So I'd say both of those pieces were really what drew me to those sports.
Yeah, and I guess in soccer, it's like you said, they all have like very similar components as far as like the team aspect goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you kind of notice that in soccer in terms of like what drove you to be the athlete that you were in your sport at your peak? Like what was it about sports that was like, yes, this is for me? And what was it maybe even about soccer?
So like my whole life, I can credit my brother for this. Like it was like whatever my big brother did, I was going to do. So it was always basketball and soccer for me. And I was honestly probably like more naturally skilled and gifted playing basketball. And like, it was always like one day I like soccer more, one day I like basketball more. And I think for me, it was also the team aspect of soccer, which is why I chose soccer, because number one, I felt like there was more opportunities for me to play at the next level. And number two, just like I felt like the team, like I had better team chemistry with the girls on my team, on my soccer team, rather than my basketball team. And I guess, had better experiences in a team environment with soccer. So I would say that similar to what you said, the team environment. And in my opinion, like, if you kind of look at all the different sports, soccer is like really a team sport. Like you can't have one star on the team and then they do well if no one else is good, right? Whereas like basketball, you kind of can get by with like one really good player, right? Obviously it's still a team sport, but I feel like, you know, in the NBA, it's like all ISO ball where one player can like do a majority of the work, which soccer, it's not like that at all. So I totally agree with you in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. Who were some of your role models growing up with soccer?
Oh, you know, the usual, the usual like Mia Hamm, Brandy Chastain, Christine Lilly, Julie Foudy, like all of those who
Yeah.
were in like, you know, like the 99 World Cup. Like I remember watching like so vividly, like watching the games and be like, man, I want to be them. Like when they were in the Rose Bowl, like I want to be like them. And then I would go outside and I would juggle. And then I had Mia Hamm posters all over my wall. I had a Mia Hamm quotes all over my wall.
Yeah.
And like, that's why now I'm like, to my girls, I'm like, you guys like watch these games because these women can like not only inspire you, but just like, I don't know, they could just be like great role models, like I had with, you know, those 99ers.
Absolutely. And I feel fortunate to have been just old enough to really remember watching them on TV and like sitting there, you know, with my dad and talking about the different like plays kind of opening up. And yeah, that was incredible. And I also remember like the marketing. I don't know why it stuck with me even to this day, but they were the greatest team you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And like now, like you have heard of that group of women and you have heard of like even the things that they're doing today. And I think that's incredible how far that sport has come, you know, particularly on the female side, and obviously all the things that they've accomplished in their own right, you know. But I thought that was great. And I just realized it was a stark contrast between soccer and hockey. I didn't really have that visibility or have that that household name in women's hockey to look up to in the same way.
Right. I remember watching, I don't know, when was the last Winter Olympics?
2000. Well,
14.
we're gonna be 2021, right? Or 2022. So was it 2018? It was 2018, I think.
Okay. Well, I remember watching because women's hockey, didn't they win gold medal?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
I really had never paid attention to hockey before that, but I was watching that and I was like so like engaged and I was like, why have I not been watching this? This is like so cool. And it was like probably one of the most fun like events that I remember about that Olympics and just like, wow, like these women are freaking awesome. So that's like, I don't know like anything about hockey other than like, that's the only like way I guess I can relate to like your side of the hockey world.
Well, that's why, you know, the Olympics are so special. And obviously part of the reason why people were just so devastated that they got postponed is there are those pockets of like opportunities to be exposed to the incredible things that people are doing that just don't otherwise make it into the mainstream world of sports on a more regular cadence. So yeah, that it's so cool as a hockey player to hear other people like rally behind, particularly the women's team during an Olympic year, because you know the NHL is going every year and the Stanley Cup's exciting, but you know the women only get a few moments like that in terms of that kind of audience and world stage. So that was an exciting game as well.
Yeah, it was for sure. So, like you were talking about breaking your collarbone, which I broke my collarbone too because I was being stupid with my basketball team when I don't even know how old I was. I was pretty young, but I broke my collarbone sledding. But for you, like obviously, you know, when we talked before this, like you've had quite a few injuries as well. What for you was the hardest part of your injuries, like physically, as far as like, I guess when you were injured, like physically, what was the hardest part of that? And then like mentally, what was the hardest part as far as coming back from injury?
Yeah, I would say overall, I actually got really lucky in my career, like hockey and rugby being super physical, but like never having any concussions, and like other pieces were a little bit more minor. So my collarbone was like really the first time where it was like true like loss of function, and it's got to just hang there in a sling until it gets to a point where the doc says it's okay to not have in a sling, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of the hardest pieces of that for me was the first time truly being confronted with the fact that I had always identified as an able-bodied person. And not just that, but as an athlete, someone who could push my body beyond its limits. And that was just something that I gained a huge sense of confidence through, was like, go to a workout, push yourself. Maybe you bust out a rep more than you thought you could. And wow, I got to practice the muscles of the movement, but also the mental muscle of overcoming an adversity in that sense. And to lose the ability to operate in that sphere, to gain confidence in that sphere, and to really just have to sit there and watch my body like refuse to be on board with what my mind wanted. That disconnect was really, really difficult for me. And I know, like, I was still trying to cheat the system of like, oh, I'll go to the gym and I'll just do legs. Like, I'll sit on a bike. Like, and I was faced with the anxiety and the fear of losing what I had worked for. And then I was also forced to like be still with myself, which was something that as an athlete, as a student athlete, I've never really been asked to do in that way before. I think exercise was also a mental health outlet for me. If I was feeling anxious or whatever else, I could move and it would help. But needing to like sit there and work through it in other ways and find other outlets and find other, sources of processing was also a challenge.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess we have really different experiences with our injury, because yours happened like right at the end of your career, right? And mine happened when I was 12. So it's like, right. So it's interesting because it's just like my experience was so different because I didn't have like the maturity or like the mental skills to really like learn how to deal with it at 12, 13 years old.
Right. I mean, you had a couple, right? And at different points in your career. I'm really curious how those, whether it's ages or experiences, differed, and why. Like, what were you able to learn from one that you could take into the next?
Yeah. So like my first one was 12. 12 and then 13, I had surgery, was ACL. So that was the biggest one. That's where I had like full ACL reconstruction and, like kind of just like stitching up my meniscus. So that was really difficult from a physical standpoint. Kind of like what you said, is like I couldn't do anything with my body. And I remember sitting in the bathtub after I was able to take my brace off after surgery and like looking at my leg, and my leg was like the size of my forearm because I hadn't moved it for, I don't know, like a month or two, which doesn't seem that long, but when you don't use your muscle for that long, it just goes away.
Yeah.
And that was so hard for me, just realizing, man, like I have a lot of work to do. And like I did put in so much like physical work, as far as like I went to physical therapy, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 times a week. My dad pushed me so hard because he wanted me to get back like as quickly as possible. But at that age, like I don't think I realized how important like doing the exercises and the mobility work outside of physical therapy was. Like the lesson I learned from that is now I can't fully bend my right knee, and I probably never will be able to. So like after my second injury, which was a super simple surgery, they just like cleaned it out. That was when I was a junior in high school. I was like really hitting my physical therapy hard because I was going to go to college. Like I knew that the mistakes that I made the first time, I couldn't make it the second time, with like not really putting in the work and getting strong and like not losing more mobility than I already had. So I think that just learning the importance of like putting in the work when you're injured. And then in college, obviously it happened again when I was a sophomore, or actually no, very start of junior year happened in college. And that one was easy. I literally walked out of surgery on my own, maybe a few weeks recovery. But in college, like when you have injuries in college, it's almost like you have to do more work than people that are healthy, because you still have to attend every meeting, every practice, every lifting session, and you have to attend physical therapy. You have to get treatment. You have to like do all of this extra stuff. So I think that's where I really learned like I don't know, like managing your time and the importance of keeping yourself healthy, because the healthier you are, like the more optimal, obviously, you can function, but the more time you have to do the things you love. Like when you're not healthy, you have to spend all this time trying to get healthy, right? So I
Right.
think just the difference between 1, 2, and 3 was just working, how hard I worked while I was injured, and knowing that the work I put in now is really going to show on the field. And also like the mental stuff. Like, gosh, I obviously at 12, I didn't know how to like visualize. And that's when I really started struggling with confidence when I got back from that injury. That's where it all started for me. And then, after my other 2 surgeries, like I was kind of taught like the value of visualizing and how important it can be, especially for injured players to use, since you can't touch a ball, like you can at least kind of go through it mentally and use mental imagery to kind of keep yourself, I don't know, like in touch with what you're missing out on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, how would you communicate to your young girls that you work with, Alpha Girl Soccer now, that importance of doing the rehab or keeping yourself healthy, or like those mental skills now, or how would you have liked to have heard those when you were that age for it to really sink in, rather than learn it that way years later?
Well, the thing is that like my dad told me all the time, hey, you got to do it, you got to do it. But a lot of times teenagers don't listen to their parents, right?
Right.
Many teenagers, every parent I talk to, they're like, it doesn't matter what I say, they don't listen, right? So I think if I would have had some sort of mentor to like help me through the process, whether it was like I had a big brother, but he'd never been injured, just anyone that had been through that process, they could tell me like, Shay, like you are going to be sorry if you don't take 10 minutes and stretch, right? Like you're not going to be able to bend your knee when you're 30 years old. Like I would have listened to them. So I think just having a mentor, and not even just a mentor, but just like nowadays, there's so much stuff you can find on Instagram, via podcasts, via the internet, right? And back then, like I didn't really have that stuff where I could like go learn that information on my own. So I would say like find a mentor who's kind of been through the process that can help you, and especially with the mental side, because it's so hard. Like find someone that can guide you and let you know that, hey, it's okay that you can't like do this and this and this. Like you just have to listen to your body, and like everything's going to be okay. So a mentor, and then just like doing the best you can to not like get stagnant and not get complacent about where you are, because you can still get better while you're injured, right? Whether it's mentally or physically, there are always ways where you can grow and expand like your mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that that experience was an important part of why you wanted to start Alpha Girl Soccer?
Yeah, I mean, it was everything, honestly. Like I think like if I didn't get injured, I maybe wouldn't have gone through the lows in my confidence. Maybe I would have at one point, but I think like I said, that's what's really started my lack of confidence. And it's just given, I'm so glad it happened, because now I have the experience. Now I have the experience with injury. I have the experience with confidence. I have all of that I can now like teach other girls how to go through it, so that they don't have to like struggle through it like I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I firmly believe that there's something to that aspect of being able to say, I've been there, I know how you're feeling, like, and I've gotten through it, and you will too. Like, from the times that I've gone through stuff, the ability for someone to come alongside me and truly know that they understand was some of the most impactful support that I was able to get through that process. So I think that's incredible. Why have you decided to work with female athletes in particular?
I think it comes a lot from kind of the experiences I had with like my club teams and stuff. I was very, very fortunate. Like from the age of 12, I had a female coach, and then I had a male coach. And then the rest of them through club, through high school, through college, they were all females. Like I had male assistant coaches and stuff. but I had so many female coaches in my career. And one of the club that I was a part of, it was an all girls club. So the owner, the president of the club, she was my coach towards the last 2-3 years of my club ball. But she, like, I think that was a big part of it, and realizing that there's a need for like an all girls program. And a lot of times, like, girls they're not really on equal playing field a lot. So I wanted to give girls an opportunity to where this was just for them. Like, it was dedicated to them. It's who I personally like coaching more. Like, I've coached both. I prefer coaching girls more, but really it's just, I wanted it to be like a safe space for them where they knew that they were the priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really special. And you've been going for a couple years now.
Yeah, it's been like 4 years. I always lose track. It seems like forever, but I think it's like 4 years.
Very cool. How have you seen it progress since the beginning?
Well, it's interesting because I get, like, I've had a lot of players that I've literally trained and worked with from like first when I started, but I've gotten a lot of new girls too. And the thing is that a lot of these girls, they're not that different from each other, right? I think I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's something that I've really noticed, is that they're all kind of going through the same things, right? The girls I coach, they're all about the same age too, and the same, teenager age range, but they're all kind of going through the same thing. They all have, at one point or another, some kind of confidence or self-worth issues. And that's why I started focusing on like the mental part, because I realized how important it was. So I guess during my 4 years of solely just training, that's what I've learned the most, is that like these girls really need like someone dedicated to helping them, like with the mental side of not just their game, but with life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. It's very cool.
Yeah. So a kind of like I guess a transition, speaking of transitions, is when you were talking about like how you broke your collarbone and you just like didn't know what to do, like what was next for you? Like, I think that's something a lot of athletes, and something I struggled with, is like, crap, I'm done playing my sport. I've played it for like 21 years. Now what do I do? So what was, I guess, something that helped you like with your transition from being an athlete to now like figuring out what's next for you?
Yeah, I think probably the most important aspect of that transition for me was holding on to a sense of curiosity. And I think that this is one of the biggest things that I am an advocate for in people's lives in general, is how can you get curious about the situation that you're in, about the world around you, about the people around you, about yourself, because it can open up a lot of doors that you otherwise don't see. And so for me, as I said, moved from Hawaii back to home, which was New England. I got to be back around Dartmouth as an alumni, and still involved with the Dartmouth rugby team, which was incredible, but also tough because I was very close to the sport, my old team, and I wasn't able to step on the field with them. So I was starting to like get to know what that role of coach or support from the sidelines felt like and looked like, and just decided that I overall have a passion for being in the world of sports. There's something about it that's drawn me to it time after time, from one sport to another. And I was a psychology major in school, and I had some really impactful classes that covered sociology of sport and the impact it has, leadership in sport, those kind of things. So I didn't know where I wanted to take it. I didn't know if I wanted to go towards being a coach, towards being a sports psychologist, towards being a team manager, etc. I just knew that I wanted to be able to have an impact in that world, and particularly in the way that people felt in the culture of a team. So the way that, they felt valued or felt like they were growing as a person, not just on the field, but off it as well. So I think I took that curiosity and I took that knowledge of sport something, and I started looking for opportunities and was able to fortunately just say yes and be flexible and find ways that even something that like was the low on the totem pole job was going to add value or give me a perspective in that world. So for some context, I've done everything from managed, a USA rugby camp to helped with team manager to worked with US ski and snowboard as, and uniforming and cross country team management, to leadership development through Dartmouth's leadership program. So I feel like I've seen quite the range of different sides of sports. My current role right now is with US ski and snowboard as athlete career and education manager. So supporting the athletes with all the off snow resources in their life as the national team athletes. And I'm really lucky that that parallels my passion with the Sideline Perspective. And I've started to really like dial it in. Like, okay, it's not just sports anymore. It's leadership and character development. It's not just leadership and character development. It's, off field, off snow, personal development, and it's transition particularly. So like the curiosity and engagement and willingness to be open to opportunities from the start helped me dial it in. By no means did I transition and say, I'm passionate about transition.
But here, like, do you ever think like, because we're in the same boat where it's like, yes, we transitioned from being an athlete to not being an athlete, but we never really transitioned away from sports, right? So in a sense, like this part of me still is like wrapped up, I guess you could say wrapped up in the identity as a soccer player or a soccer coach, right? And like, do you ever feel like your identity will like always be like wrapped up in sports?
I feel like yes and no. I feel like my identity will, for probably most of my life, be wrapped really strongly around being a physically able person, being able to walk into a gym and be strong or also compete with people, and to take on challenges that in a similar sense to sport push me physically and mentally. I think that's something I will always lean into as a person or try and surround myself with people who are like-minded in that way. In terms of being tied specifically to the sports of hockey or rugby, I think I've been able to distance myself a little bit from that. And that's partially from not having been tied still really closely to those worlds. So I coach once in a while, but it's not like my main thing. And rugby is just a little bit harder to get involved with in the area that I'm in now. Yeah. So taking a little bit of a back burner as well. So I think those factors kind of helped me shift a little bit, but I still feel it every time I step into a physical arena that I view myself as an athlete, often judge myself based on previous physical accomplishments, and show up in that athlete mindset.
Yeah. So, because you're more of an expert on this than I am, and I've had girls in my program very recently ask me, and like they played a very high level, and they're like, Coach Shay, like, how do I, because I did an episode on like finding your identity outside of sports, and I got them thinking like, man, like my identity is that I'm a soccer player and that's all I am. So like, I guess I'm asking for advice for my own players is like, what would you tell them as far as like, how can you, and I know this is something a lot of girls struggle with, but like if you're a soccer player, basketball player, rugby player, whatever it is, how can you like identify yourself as more than just the sport that you play?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because if you look at it, our sport structures so much of our daily lives when we're in it. It's saying you're getting up at this time for practice. You're going to a meal with these people because your schedules are the same. It's determining your social groups, your priorities, your day-to-day tasks, the things that you're driven or passionate about, even like things outside of it, because you might be more prone to turn on a soccer game than whatever other movie everyone's talking about or Tiger King or whatever. So it's guiding so much of our decisions. And when we put it on autopilot, it's like, if it's soccer, then okay, soccer guides, how I make this choice. So I think like being a little bit more intentional about that can be a good start. And just saying like, okay, in the scope of a day, in the scope of a week, how much of my time is being taken up by my sport? And how do I feel about that? Like, do I feel locked into this identity, and does it feel restricting, or does it feel like that's, fulfilling me in these ways? And I think another piece too is diversifying, your portfolio of your identity. Just like we would take any other asset of ours, any other thing that we really value, we don't want to lose it all in one shot. So money goes into different places. Our identity should go into different places as well. And in some respects, it might be there, but not evenly dispersed. And for the sake of a elite and highly competitive athlete, it requires some of that investment into a larger chunk towards your sport. But I think a really good exercise to start looking at where you are with that piece is to take a piece of paper and write out, I am, ... and go down the list. And how many different ways can you finish that sentence? I am. And you might start with a few labels, like I am a soccer player. I am, a daughter, a friend, a teammate. But then you'll start to get into these nuances of, I'm someone who loves a cup of tea on the porch. I'm someone who is invigorated by sunshine. I'm someone who loves to cuddle, and you start to get to these other pieces, some of these intangibles of who you are really beyond just what the world is affirming you as and what you're baseline operating at.
I love that. So like I really, really like that. And it's something like super easy to do. And then like one thing I told her to do, and it's kind of similar to what you just said, but it's like write down like all the things that you like to do and like pick one of those things to do every week so that you're not just like tied to your soccer schedule. Like if you like hiking, like pick a day, go hiking, right? And stuff like that. But I really like the whole like I am, and then obviously I think a lot of it's going to be labels like you said, but then it'll kind of tie more into like who you are like as a person, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I've actually learned from watching the ski and snowboard athletes, it wasn't something that I would have thought about in my own training, but I've seen some of these athletes, they're competing at a professional and elite at an Olympic level, and it's hard to have that dominate every single aspect of your life. And training, they get a training program, but sometimes it's, I'd really like to go on this big adventure up this mountain. And that might replace my training for today, but I really enjoy being an outdoorsy person and going on these types of adventures. And so I'm going to have a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of grace, and work with a coach and work with my knowledge of my body to make that adjustment, because that's important to who I am. I would say me as an athlete, I would do every rep to the T in the gym. Like that was my safe space. I didn't leave the box of the gym. Like I didn't explore who I was physically outside of the gym. I didn't play with different ways to be active, different ways to be social. So I think that's, another piece of it as well, is to just kind of look at how can those things that you love to do still fit into the big picture of wanting to pursue a dream in the realm of sports, because I don't think it should have to be a cut and dry one or the other, because that's not setting us up for success and transition either.
Right, for sure. So like taking this a little more personal, like do you, because I'll kind of tell you my thoughts on this as far as how I see it, but do you, like as a business owner, do you ever feel like your identity is tied to what you do as a business owner?
I would say it's getting more and more tied as I find myself investing more and more in the idea of the impact this could have as it grows. Like certainly the impact it has had, but then my hopes and dreams for the future, and how much that lights me up and how much that fuels me. Quite honestly, I wasn't sure that I was going to find that feeling again after sport, in terms of like giving myself to something that felt bigger than me, that felt like I could find that state of flow in terms of like working on it or training for it. And I feel really lucky that I got to find that in a passion and in something that was impactful, like the Sideline Perspective. And yeah, so I think that's starting to take up much more of my time. And certainly it's becoming more and more that case as people are associating me with it. So as more and more people know, oh, that's the thing that Mac started, or that's, you know, Mac's mission and what she cares about and what she's put together. And so, yeah, I can feel it both outwardly and inwardly becoming more a part of myself.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel the exact same way. It's like obviously I told you that I feel like I never quite transitioned from being an athlete to what I do now, but now it's like I feel so tied to like what I do. Like I'm Shay, I'm like a confidence coach, right? And like you said, the more people associate that as who I am, like the harder time I have of like just being me, right? And it's hard because when you love something so much and you always want to help the people you're helping, it can be hard to like back away and just be like, you know what, I'm not a confidence coach right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm just Shay and I just want to be me, right?
Right.
And that's something that I really have a hard time with, like getting super personal here. But when I went on a trip this weekend to Arizona, and like it was fun, but it's like I couldn't stop thinking about work. Like I was still thinking about, oh, what can I do? How can I make this better? Who do I need to reach out to? Like, oh, I need to message this girl back because she needs help. Like I couldn't like truly enjoy my vacation because my identity is so tied to like what I do that I have a hard time stepping back and just like being me and like letting go of that, if that makes sense.
It makes 100% sense. And it's, thank you for sharing. And it's funny that you bring it up because last week was my vacation week.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we went on a trip. I was with my boyfriend who's still doing school, and we were visiting his brother who's working. So everybody's there on their computers during the day, and it was my vacation. But there I was. I just pulled up my computer, sat right down next to him, and said, okay, it's a whole week for the Sideline Perspective. And I dove into it. And I was proud of the things that I got done, but was I fully shut off? Absolutely not. And I get really torn between this, right? Because if it's something that you love that much, it feels like it's just so natural to give to it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we don't have to still look at those same boundaries. We don't still need to come back to that idea of diversifying who we are and not falling into that same trap of, okay, we're not necessarily talking about our sport anymore, but we're talking about still something that we love. And if we dump all of ourselves into this thing, you never know what's happening in the world, and it's still liable to be taken from us or lost in some way. And so I think, yeah, that exploration of all of that is so important. And I need to find it too, in the sense that like I still struggle with my own transition out of hockey and rugby. I have days where I just like I miss being in that athlete mindset and competing with my team and the simplicity of it more than anything else. And those are tough days. And then I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, Mac, you're the person who like wants to talk about athlete transition and should have it figured out, but I don't. And I actually think that's a strength that I bring to the conversation, is reminding people that we don't all have it figured out, and we're going to be vulnerable and open with that sense. I'm curious because you mentioned sometimes you don't want to be Shay, the confidence coach. You know, how does that contrast with some of those sides of yourself that you need to show? Like, do you feel like you're always, when you show up as Shay, the confidence coach, do you always need to have the answers and be confident yourself?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's so much of like not because I never say I have all the answers because I don't have all the answers. But I think maybe for me, I think it comes down to more so the boundaries thing, right? Like I feel like my personality as Shay and as a confidence coach, they're very similar in that I'm kind of weird and I like humor. Like I like to have my humor come out. But I think it's more so the whole boundaries thing of like, I don't know when to just let loose and just have fun and like turn my brain off. That's the thing is I have the hardest time turning my brain off because I'm like a really type A, like go, 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 so driven, always wanting to learn something, always wanting to get better. So I have a hard time turning that off. So I think that's my biggest problem. And probably like a lot of the girls' problem that the player I was talking to, like she probably has the same issue of like turning her brain off and like being able to just relax. And so I think it can be related to both like the professional business world and also to athletics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I resonate with that quality too. And sometimes I wonder, like, is that what made me as good of an athlete as I was able to become? Like, it's a superpower, but it's an Achilles heel at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's like a double-edged sword a little bit. Like I appreciate that about myself and I would rather have that than not have that. But I think it's just like learning how to like dial it down sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely
Yeah.
agree.
Interesting. Yeah. That's like, I don't know. I appreciate you being vulnerable too, because like I said, I think that whoever's listening, kind of no matter where they are, they can relate to that and realize that like, hey, it's okay sometimes to like turn off and just like be you and not have to be what other people want you to be all the time.
Absolutely. It's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of shift into, because I know this is something we want to talk about or that we wanted to talk about with kind of like how athletics has helped us, which we kind of just mentioned, I guess, but how athletics has helped us like build our own businesses. So for you, like, I don't know, let's kind of talk about what part of athletics really like helped you to become the business person that you are today, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I jump first to the concept of having a team around me and like wanting, always seeking to like find the support of teammates, of coaches, obviously in different contexts, but people who can be by my side in a journey. So I said I was drawn to the sport of hockey and of rugby because of that team environment. And that's something that really like helps fuel me in being an entrepreneur, because otherwise if you don't create that for yourself, it can be really lonely. So I feel really fortunate to have quickly gathered a handful of friends, former teammates, some of them, and mentors in the world of entrepreneurship who I know I can call, and if I just go off about the sideline perspective, they'll listen and they'll give critical feedback. And I think that was a big piece that I learned about myself in sports and was able to replicate, so to speak, in the world of business, as well as the idea of asking for help. I was really fortunate to have had a dad that always emphasized like, you don't need to be too proud to ask for help. If you have a mission, you have a goal, tell people about it, because if they don't know about it, they can't help you. And so, yeah, it was nerve-wracking at first with the sideline perspective, not knowing how it would build, not knowing where it would go, knowing that once I put something out in the open, I was accountable to it, and being someone who wants to be known as someone with integrity, who I'm going to start a podcast. Well, I better start the podcast, So it was scary to put those goals and those dreams out there. But when I put them out there and I asked for help in achieving them, people came around, and that was really incredible.
Curious, when did you like, I don't know, when did that dream of like starting Sideline Perspective, when did that first happen? Or like as a kid, did you ever have dreams of like kind of building your own business, or did it just kind of come as you got older?
I think by early college, I thought it would be really cool to write a book or like have something unique to say, I guess. Not that I knew what that was going to be yet. And it was after retiring from hockey. I was starting to feel the loss of that particular side of me as an athlete, a hockey player. And I was seeing other Dartmouth athletes go through that transition as well. And I would say it was actually particularly the football players where I noticed it the most. Ivy League student athletes. So really they're being taught two different definitions of success. One is you make it to the NFL and you're successful in the athletic realm. Or two is you get the suit and tie, you land the big job after graduating from a school like Dartmouth, and that's success in the academic or the business realm. Right. And I saw Pro Day come around for the spring, and athletes who said, oh, I'm going to make the NFL, those dreams were maybe given a reality check.
Yeah.
So they shift, like, okay, if I'm not successful in that realm, let me be successful in this other realm. But sometimes athletics ask us to compromise different aspects of our academic experience or our extracurricular experiences. So maybe we don't have the same internship credibility that other students might have. And so they weren't necessarily getting picked as the top candidates for those big time, suit and tie jobs either. So they fall somewhere in the middle, but no one has ever taught them how to navigate this space in the middle. And they have to learn how to define success for themselves because they didn't fit into those two avenues. And quite frankly, in that period of defining it, they were left at first feeling like they had no value. And that really broke my heart, because I think anyone who's made it out the other side of a student athlete experience or an elite athlete experience, you have a skill set that is so unique. The time management alone, I mean, you were speaking to it earlier, when you have rehab, you have to do everything else that everyone's doing, and you have to rehab. And that is a full day. So just the act of getting to graduation, just the act of competing for 4 years or going through whatever adversity is thrown your way in those scenarios, I think builds a person to have a lot of value, and they weren't seeing it for themselves. And so that hurt me. And then I was sitting with that idea for a bit of like, okay, how could I communicate to those athletes that they have value? In fact, I wrote a letter to one, just because I figured if I didn't write a letter, who else was going to tell him that he had value beyond his sport? And then, I want to write a letter to all of my teammates, everyone that I care about leaving their sport. And how can I do that efficiently? Well, let me write a book. Ultimately, writing a book seemed like a really daunting process. And I wanted to know what everybody else was saying about the topic as well. So that's where it turned into a website, and I wanted to collect people's stories and hear what they were going through, and it's built from there. But yeah, I'd say it was in that moment. And then, of course, it was also magnified by my collarbone and my own experience there. And so that's where it became retirement and injury and the parallels of those experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I liked when you said something along the lines of like defining what success means to you, right? Because I feel like, at least for me, like growing up, success was defined as going to college and getting a 9-to-5 job, having a stable income, having benefits, like all that kind of stuff, right? And so I think that it's important for kids, and honestly for everyone, to like success looks different for everybody. So like, what does success mean to you? It doesn't matter what you're supposed to do, right? Who cares what you're supposed to do? Stop worrying about what you're supposed to do and figure out, what does success look like for me? Is it working a 9-to-5? Great. That's awesome. Is it building your own business? Great. Is it working on a humanitarian project? Whatever it is. But you have to figure out for yourself, what does success mean to me? Not what does it mean to my grandma or to society, but how can I be successful for me, not for anybody else?
100%. And answering that question is hard.
It is.
It takes sitting with yourself. It takes asking yourself the hard questions. It takes reflecting on things. And honestly, I think it takes a lot of courage to do that work, but it is so beneficial in the long run, I think.
And honestly, though, it also evolves a lot, because what I would say even 2 years ago is way different than what I would say now, as far as what success means to me, right? So also, like, don't be married to what you thought success looked like a year ago or 2 years ago, because it's probably going to change based on how you evolve. And hopefully you're evolving, because that means you're growing. So that's just like, I was thinking about that today for me, and I haven't gone through the exercise yet, but I was listening to a podcast today right before we came on, and she was like, well, you have to define what success means to you. And I'm like, dang, I haven't done that for a while. Like, that's something that I need to do. So it kind of tied in perfectly to what you were talking about. And I think it's important for everyone,
Yeah, incredibly important.
Yeah, nice. So what else? What else shall we dive into?
Well, you wrote a book, She the Confident.
I did.
And I would love, I mean, I just said that the idea of writing a book, a couple of years ago was so daunting to me, of like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to say something to the world. And I took a step back and kind of rewrote it and whatnot. But how did you go through that process? Like, what did writing a book mean to you, and how did you start?
How did I start? So in April of 2019, I was like, I want to write a book. All right. So I was like, I'm going to write a book on like how girls can be more confident, kind of take them through my journey and teach them the lessons that I learned and that I currently teach. And so actually I wasn't even teaching it yet when I first had the idea of writing the book. But anyways, I didn't actually start writing it until October. October rolled around, and I was like, oh man, like I haven't started writing this book yet. And I told myself I was going to write a book in 2019. And so in October, here's the thing is like, for me, I don't really care about things being perfect. Like, I would rather just get it out into the world. And there's some typos in there. Like, there's some wrong links in there. Like, I need to update my picture. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong in my book. Right. But I put it out there, and I knew that when I did it, that it was going to be imperfect. So in October, I was like, all right, I'm going to write this book. I did a little bit of research. I had mentors that helped me through the process. And I did it the easiest possible way that you can do it, which is through Amazon. So it's so easy. All I did was hire an editor to help edit after I wrote the manuscript. And then from there, it's really easy as far as like getting it into Amazon and doing that. So I think when people think of like writing and publishing a book, they think it's this big, scary thing, which it can be if you like traditionally publish. But if you self-publish, it can be really easy. And as far as like the process goes for me, I wrote it. So from October, I released it in December. So like a little, about 2 months, right? It took me about 2 months. But for me, it was really just like outlining. That was the hardest part for me, was outlining what do I want to be in the book. And then from there, I just like every week I was like, okay, I'm going to write a chapter this week, and just really drawing from my experiences. And then also making it extremely actionable, because I know that humans, if they don't take action on something, they're not actually going to get the real benefit from it. And for kids especially, and that's kind of who I wrote it for, is like the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl, is like I really need to put stuff in here that they can actually practice, or else they're not going to see the results that they could. So writing a book, honestly, and I made a post about this, I think it was this week, that like it really was the best decision that I ever made. And if I would have listened to all the gurus, all the business gurus, they would say, don't write a book when you're just starting out. And I'm so glad I had a guy tell me, you're not ready for a book. Don't do it. And I just did it anyways. And maybe I did things out of order, but I did it, and it's helped girls. And if that's what it's done, and then I'm so glad that I did it. So I'm glad I didn't listen to the people that told me not to do it.
Yeah. Didn't listen to the haters.
Yeah, he really, because I was a little bit upset. I was like, why shouldn't I do this? And then people now too, they're like, don't write a book until you have like all this stuff put in place. But I just did it anyways, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and I would imagine you've learned so much from the experience, and you have something out there that people are, like you said, being impacted by and seeing the benefit of. And maybe you've even thought of like a couple more things like, oh, that could have gone in there. well, your next process, if you were to write a next book, it's going to be that much better because you've had that experience.
Yeah. And it's crazy because I only wrote it not even a year ago, but already if I was to do it again, not to necessarily that I'd say I'd do it a lot differently, but there would be a lot of new things because I've learned so much from when I wrote it. So there would be a lot of new things. I would probably have done things a little bit differently. It would probably look quite a bit different, but that's still like, doesn't mean that I can't go write another one this year.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that process. I think when people achieve something like that and, put a goal out there and then follow through on it and have a finished project, it's really cool to see their process behind it and to understand kind of what that person went through to get that final product.
Yeah. And I think what stops most people from speaking their mind or from putting out something or building something, it's like, I feel like people are just, number one, scared of the judgments that they're going to receive. Right. And number two, like they let like their fear of perfection hold them back from like just putting it out there, whether it's perfect or not. Right. Like it's never going to be perfect. Like I could have easily sat on this book for 6 more months and maybe it would have been a little bit better. But I honestly, like, I just wanted to get it out there. And I think a lot of people, whether it's sports or life or business, just sit on their ideas for too long without like just taking imperfect action.
Yep. I'm definitely guilty of that. So that'll be something that I'm going to try and do better going forward with. I'm curious, for content wise with the book, what would you say, without giving away the whole book, is one big takeaway that you hope anyone who reads it has?
If I was to say in one phrase what I want girls to get out of the book is just to believe in yourself, right? Every part of the book, that's really the end goal, is to believe in yourself, right? Whether it's like the book's broken down into mindset, then to specific confidence strategies such as visualizing, developing routines, surrounding yourself with positive people. And then it goes into goal setting, creating habits, leadership. Like that's kind of like what the book, I guess the contents of the book, but the message of the book and what I want girls to experience after is just like the belief that they have in themselves. That's the number one goal.
Yeah, that's huge. Something I wish I knew as a younger athlete.
Yeah.
And still work on today, to be honest.
Well, that's the thing too, is like, I don't know. I think as sometimes as teachers and as coaches, we teach and we coach the things that we need to hear also. Right. Like it's stuff that I still have to work on. And I'm sure some of the stuff you teach, which you already talked about, is stuff that you still need to work on. And I think that's what makes a good coach, is like, you're kind of going through it with the people that you're teaching.
Absolutely. Hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up, where we'll kind of tell where we can find each other and everything, but where can my audience find you on social media, and then like your website and all that?
Absolutely. So the website is just www.thesidelineperspective.com. And we're most active on Instagram, simply at the Sideline Perspective, and then on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify with the Sideline Perspective podcast.
Beautiful. So if you were to say like, what is your main, I guess, like target audience of who you can really help the most? Like what age range would you say?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to define an age range specifically. Anyone who has felt like they've taken on an athletic identity in some respects.
So anyone.
And I say that because I'm not going to take away the validity of the adversity and the struggles that someone might go through on the sidelines simply because they didn't make a certain team or they're not at a certain level or a certain age. I think anyone who's trying to figure out who they are beyond sport and has felt a sense of loss from losing their sport, engage in this conversation with us. Please, you are so welcome.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure on my show that I'll post all of those links there so that they can kind of engage with you. And I think that what you're offering and what you're doing is extremely beneficial. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find my website at alphagirlconfidence.com, and then on Instagram at Shay Haddo. And then this is probably the first time that I'll say anything about this is on Instagram at Alpha Girl. I'm changing it from Alpha Girl Soccer to Alpha Girl Confidence. So that might be in place when you hear this. So either Alpha Girl Soccer or Alpha Girl Confidence. I'm doing a big rebrand this week and next week. So it's all kind of changing, which is exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
Nice.
I haven't told anybody about it yet. So this is where you hear it first. Welcome, folks. All right.
Very cool.
Thanks, Mac. I'm so excited so glad that we were able to have this conversation, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of girls out there.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for taking the time.